Coming up on a newscast, President Yoon heads to Spain for the NATO summit. During the trip, the South Korean leader will take part in a trilateral meeting with his American and Japanese counterparts. Korea Electric Power Corporation announced power prices will be raised. A family of 4 that uses around 307 kilowatts per month will have to pay around $1 more. Russian missiles hit an apartment block as well as a kindergarten in Ukraine. First such attack in weeks comes as G7 leaders gather to discuss sanctions on Moscow. Hope your week's off to a smooth start. I'm Daniel Che. Let's begin with our top story. President Yoon travels to Spain for the NATO summit. This will be his first in-person appearance at a multilateral summit. Key topics will likely be North Korea issues and economic security. Yoon starts us off.
The itinerary has begun for the South Korean leader about to make his debut at a multilateral summit. President Yoon and First Lady Kim Gun-hee left for Madrid on Monday for this week's NATO summit, which will involve a number of sideline meetings with leaders from around the world. Yoon is the very first South Korean head of state to join the Western Alliance meeting. A busy schedule lie ahead for the South Korean president, a NATO allies and partners session, a series of bilateral summits, talks with NATO's Secretary General, meetings with the King of Spain, Felipe VI, as well as with Spanish business leaders. There will be a trilateral summit between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan on Wednesday, the first such meeting to be held in nearly 5 years, where the 3 leaders will discuss regional security involving North Korea issues. Yoon will have bilateral meetings with European leaders, including the Netherlands, Poland, Denmark, the UK, and more, on prevailing agenda like cooperation on exports of nuclear energy, semiconductors, and renewable energy. At the summit with NATO's Asia-Pacific partners, South Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand, President Yoon will speak for about 3 minutes to shore up international support for North Korea's denuclearization. It's unlikely that there will be a one-on-one, however, between President Yoon and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida because of thorny historical issues, though a short greeting is possible. Also, 4-way talks involving Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand seems unlikely. First Lady Kim, who is accompanying Yoon on his first overseas trip, will be attending sessions for the leaders' spouses. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Staying with the upcoming meeting between NATO leaders and its key partners, let's delve deeper into what the organization stands for, its purpose, and the expected topics in the latest session. Min Suk-hyun gives us an overview.
The North Atlantic Treaty Organization is a military alliance that was created in 1949 in the aftermath of World War II. Its initial purpose was to deter the Soviet Union expansion in Europe. But when the Cold War ended, the organization was reconceived as a cooperative security alliance. Currently, 30 countries from North America and Europe are members of NATO. The alliance started off with only 12 founding members and gradually expanded to include more over the years. Most recently, Finland and Sweden have applied to join and are now in the accession process. At the core of NATO's founding treaty is a principle of collective defense that brings members together to safeguard their freedom and security. This idea of collective defense is enshrined in Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty. It reads, "An attack against one shall be considered as an attack against all, committing them to protect and assist each other." So far, Article 5 has been invoked once by the U.S., following the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Today, in response to Russia's aggression against Ukraine, NATO is stepping up its collective defense measures. It's deployed more than 40,000 troops and transported significant air and naval assets to the eastern part of the alliance to ensure the security of its members.
NATO solidarity was not very strong before the Ukraine war. But Russia's invasion of Ukraine spurred fears that such attacks could be made on any NATO member, prompting NATO solidarity and triggering non-NATO members to join the alliance.
At this year's summit, NATO leaders are expected to thoroughly discuss how to respond to the new security challenges in Europe. Min Suk-hyun, Arirang News.
Pyongyang accuses Washington of trying to build an Asian-style NATO. The regime claims continued American hostility has compelled it to develop a stronger defense. In a statement released on Sunday, the North's foreign ministry referred to the recent joint military exercises conducted by the U.S., South Korean and Japanese militaries. It criticized Washington for what it calls a hypocritical aim of overthrowing the North Korean government while talking about diplomatic engagement. The reclusive state may have been referring to the allies' discussions on possibly moving to deploy U.S. strategic assets to the peninsula. With growing speculation that North Korea could conduct a nuke test, an American spy plane was seen flying near Seoul. According to Flight Radar 24, it was an RC-135U combat send. Last Friday, the regime's leader ordered its military to bolster the duties of its frontline units. The U.S. recon plane was also spotted several times about a month ago when the presidents of South Korea and the U.S. met in the nation's capital, but it hasn't been seen the past couple of weeks. Seoul's Unification Minister met with the foreign press to clarify where the government stands on inter-Korean affairs. Pyeongyang emphasized dialogue with the regime is not based on the condition of denuclearization and neither is aid. Han Sung-woo shares with us his remarks.
South Korea's Unification Minister Kwon Young-se has stressed that the denuclearization of North Korea is a must for inter-Korean relations, but not a prerequisite for engaging in dialogue and offering the regime humanitarian aid. Meeting with foreign media based in Seoul on Monday, Kwon also elaborated on his plans to continue the unification efforts of previous governments that the Yoon administration deems relevant, an approach he refers to as running in a relay race.
Running a relay doesn't mean we'll be copying and pasting the policies from previous administrations, but instead evolving them. We will strongly pursue inter-Korean peace and the improvement of the North's human rights situation without ever giving up on the goal of denuclearizing the regime and ultimately achieving unification.
Regarding the COVID-19 situation there, Minister Kwon confirmed that Pyongyang is still unresponsive to Seoul's offer of medical assistance. He acknowledged, though, that it does seem China is providing aid behind closed doors, before reiterating Seoul is also willing to provide aid.
There's a need for us to patiently wait. We'll be ready whenever Pyongyang asks for help.
The minister also addressed the elephant in the room, North Korea's reportedly looming 7th nuclear test, saying all that's left for it to happen is likely Kim Jong-un's final call.
To summarize it into one sentence, all preparations are complete and the only one thing left is a political decision.
Assuming the test will indeed take place, he warned that the Yoon administration won't shy away from carrying out a firm response, more intense than that of previous governments. The minister added that he believes China and Russia do support the denuclearization of the regime, despite the country's recent decision in May to veto a United Nations Security Council's resolution to impose tougher sanctions on Pyongyang. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
South Korea begins a joint training drill involving its Army, Navy and Air Force to check on their ability to deliver supplies during battle and to counter increasing cyber threats. The country plans to take part in a cyber exercise led by the U.S. later this year. Pyeongyang fills us in.
The South Korean military will be carrying out what it calls sustainment training, involving all of its armed forces from land, air, and sea. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said Monday the training will be able to better prepare the nation's armed forces for challenging situations such as when supply routes become blocked or restricted during battle. The exercise will be held for 5 days throughout this week until July 1st off the country's west coast.
The sustainment training is an actual field training exercise organized by the Joint Chiefs of Staff that involves troops from the Army, Navy, and Air Force. They will be trained to appropriately provide troops and equipment to the battlefield during war.
Later this year, the country also plans to participate in a cyber defense exercise led by the U.S. The Defense Ministry's deputy spokesperson noted that the South Korean military has been conducting various measures to deal with evolving cyber threats.
About 20 personnel will be joining the Cyber Flag exercise hosted by the US Cyber Command and scheduled to be held this October. We're also considering taking part in the cyber defense exercise organized by NATO.
This comes after the South Korean President Yoon and U.S. President Joe Biden had said in a joint statement following their summit last month that they'll significantly expand cooperation to deal with cyber threats from North Korea. Pyeongjang, Arirang News.
Korea Electric Power Corporation announced the electricity prices will be raised by 5 won per kilowatt an hour. This comes when many residents are already suffering from inflation. Kim Hyun-sung provides a glimpse of what to expect.
Electricity rates are going to rise by 5 Korean won per kilowatt hour in the third quarter. Korea Electric Power Corporation, or KEPCO, announced the new prices Monday afternoon. For an average household of 4, this will mean their bill goes up by about 1,500 won, or about $1.20. That might not seem like much, but the hottest months of the year are yet to come. And the increase will be felt more because other costs are going up so much with inflation. But the increase is much lower than what KEPCO had suggested. It said it needed a price hike of at least 33 won per kilowatt hour to make up for the money it's been losing because its prices were kept artificially low. With energy prices rising globally, KEPCO in the first quarter posted a loss of more than 7.7 trillion won, or about $6 billion. So the government had to strike a balance as it tries to pull KEPCO out of a deficit and not put too much pressure on consumers. 5 won was where KEPCO and the government struck a deal. The government also made some changes to the energy pricing rules. Until now, electricity rates could go up by no more than 3 won per quarter. Now KEPCO can raise rates by as much as 5 won. Still, with more summer heat on the way, KEPCO is giving bigger discounts to households on low incomes so that they don't have to worry too much about using air conditioning. Up to 3.5 million households could benefit from a discount of almost 10,000 won a month, about $7, which could actually make their bills lower than they were in the second quarter. But gas bills are going to rise next month, too. The monthly gas bill for an average household will go up by around 2,000 won, or more than $1.50. So combined, electricity and gas bills in July will be $3 to $4 higher than they were in June. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
Morgan Stanley forecasts the Bank of Korea will raise interest rates by 25 basis points for each of the 4 remaining meetings this year, resulting in year-end base rate of 2.75%, higher than its estimate from last month of 2.5%, with 3 25 basis point rises. It cited the BOK's continuous concerns over inflation and soaring consumer prices as key factors. The central bank is not expected to take a big step, raising 50 basis points at a time, as it has never raised more than 25 until now. 4 South Korean retailers made it to Asia's top 100. The ranking is based on sales. Shinsegae Group grabbed 7th place. Coupang and 2 others were listed above 20. Shin Se-byuk helps us look beyond the digits.
South Korean retail giant Shinsegae, together with 3 other local firms, have been included in a list of the top 100 retailers in Asia 2022. According to the list released by market researcher Euromonitor last week, Shinsegae Group were 7th, with the highest ranking for a South Korean company. It moved up 2 notches from the previous year and is the only Korean firm in the top 10. Coupang ranked 11th, followed by Lotte at 12th. South Korean internet giant Naver took 15th spot, of 5 places from the year before. An industry expert says that South Korea's competitive edge lies in successfully balancing between online and offline channels.
Big South Korean retailers have so-called multi-retail channels. They realized the importance of managing both online and offline channels quite early and have successfully managed those channels since then. That's what makes those firms stay competitive on the global stage.
The report attributed Shinsegae's strong performance to the group's acquisition of eBay Korea last year, saying the firm successfully built synergy between online and offline sales channels. Overall, Chinese retailers made up the top 3 firms. Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba led the list with sales of almost $479 billion, followed by JD.com and Pinduoduo with their sales of $368 and $112 billion, respectively. The 3 firms together recorded a total of whopping $1 trillion in sales, taking up over 70% of the total sales from the top 10 companies. Meanwhile, calling the Asian retail market a trendsetter, Euromonitor says the Asian market makes up more than a third of the global retail market, with a projected annual growth of 7% until 2026. The market expert also painted a rosy outlook for retail.
Asia is showing a higher economic growth rate than any other region in the world, and this leads people in Asia to spend and consume a lot more. As long as this growth trend continues, the Asian retail market will get bigger.
신새벽 아리랑 뉴스.
Last week, the won was trading at the highest level against the greenback in over a decade. This trend not only hurts local conglomerates, but also Koreans living and working in other countries. Yoon sheds light on the impact.
The South Korean won has been weakening against the U.S. dollar, not only as the world recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic, but due to increased external economic risks, noticeably the prolonged war in Ukraine, a global energy crunch, and the U.S. Federal Reserve's policy rate hikes. It's not just people here in South Korea that are suffering from the hard-hit currency exchange rate. This is Ms. Kim, who's been running a Korean guest house in Interlaken, Switzerland for 10 years. She's weathered through the global pandemic, but now, just ahead of the peak summer traveling season, the shocking exchange rate has left her with 0 reservations. She's agonizing over maybe having to close her business.
COVID-19 travel restrictions have been improving, so I was hoping for travelers. But now gas prices are spiking, currency rates are worsening. If this continues, I might have to shut down.
Global crises have already raised living expenses around the world, but the weakened exchange rate only makes livelihoods difficult for other Korean residents living overseas. Among them is Mr. Park, who's been studying in Shanghai, China for 9 years. He has had to make drastic cuts to his living expenses.
I'm studying abroad, so I live on the allowance my parents send. The exchange rate leaves me with less money to spend.
The exchange rate is outrageous. My allowance of 1 million won used to be around $900, but that has now dropped to around $700. I've had to move to afford rent. With many Korean international students studying abroad, the situation is just as bad for parents paying tuition fees. The average tuition for a 4-year university course in the United States is around 50 million won. Now, the exchange rate has added at least another 5 million won. Parents have no choice but to further divide payment installments while they wait for the exchange rate to improve.
We've seen more parents ask about paying tuition in installments and whether they can use credit card payments rather than bank wire transfers.
This is the first time in almost 13 years since the financial crisis of 2009 that the exchange rate has weakened to 1,300 won to the US dollar. Current circumstances and signs of major economic risks are expected to remain for the foreseeable near future, and households are continuing to face financial challenges. 이은진, 아리랑 뉴스.
Russia rejected claims that the country defaulted on its foreign currency sovereign debt. According to the Kremlin spokesperson on Monday, any default is artificial. Dmitry Peskov said it's not Russia's fault that bond payments made by the country due in May had been blocked by Euroclear due to Western sanctions. Previously, Bloomberg reported that Moscow failed to make an interest payment of around $100 million by the deadline, which was last Sunday. The initial due date was May 27th, but payment was delayed once with a grace period of 30 days. This is said to be Russia's first default in around a century. Russian missiles hit Kiev on Sunday for the first time in around 3 weeks. Ukrainian officials believe this is in response to the G7 and NATO summit coming up this week. Kim Bo-kyung has the latest.
More of their barbarism. That's how U.S. President Joe Biden described Russia's latest attack on Kiev. For the first time in around 3 weeks since early June, Russian airstrikes hammered the Ukrainian capital on Sunday. Officials say that a series of missile attacks hit a residential apartment block and kindergartens, causing at least 1 death and 6 injuries.
The building has been destroyed and we understand that there are people under rubble. They are alive. The rescuers are trying to get them out. There is a lot of smoke and we are doing our best to rescue them as soon as possible.
Long-range Russian strikes over the weekend targeted places in northern and western Ukraine, such as Lviv, at a time when G7 and NATO summits are being held this week. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has asked partners to boost their efforts in providing Ukraine with a modern air defense system to deter Russian missiles.
There are already certain agreements set, and partners need to move faster if they are really partners, not observers. Procrastination with the transfer of weapons to our state, any restrictions, this is actually an invitation for Russia to fight again and again.
He also added it is a matter of determination for the leaders of the G7 who have enough common potential to stop the aggression, not just against Ukraine, but against Europe as a whole. CNN reports that the U.S. is already planning to announce as early as this week that it has bought an advanced medium to long-range surface-to-air missile defense system for Ukraine. Currently on the ground, the Russian offensive continues in eastern Ukraine. After the key city of Severodonetsk went under complete Russian occupation, the city of Lysychansk in the Luhansk region has become a target, along with neighboring Donetsk, where Russian forces were gathering for fresh assaults. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, key political figures reacted to the latest decision by the U.S. Supreme Court to revoke the constitutional right to abortion. Many people have taken to the streets to either defend or renounce the ruling. Kim Ji-yeon has the full story.
Protests against an abortion ban erupt across the U.S. following a Supreme Court decision overturning the 1973 Roe v. Wade precedent that recognized women's constitutional right to abortion.
I feel like my country doesn't care about me. I feel like they are willing to, that they are willing to let me die instead of make my own decision.
Former President Donald Trump, however, praised the court ruling at a rally held in Illinois on Saturday.
Yesterday, the court handed down a victory for the Constitution, a victory for the rule of law, and above all, a victory for life.
The ruling, which resulted with a 6-3 conservative majority, had the support of all 3 justices appointed by Trump. The decision could dramatically change life for millions of women in America and exacerbate growing tensions in a deeply polarized country. Already nearly half of the U.S. states are now considered certain or likely to ban abortion. President Joe Biden slammed the Supreme Court, saying it has made some terrible decisions.
I think the Supreme Court has made some terrible decisions.
Key allies of the U.S. have also criticized the latest decision, with UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson saying it's a backward step. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau described the move as horrific. U.S.-based Center for Reproductive Rights said the U.S. now joins only 3 other countries, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Poland, to roll back abortion rights since 1994. Nearly 60 countries have liberalized their abortion laws over the last 25 years. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
The heat wave over the weekend caused the season's first tropical night yesterday. This means our readings were above 25 degrees Celsius for the entire night. Stuffy air will linger until tomorrow as frequent rainfall is making the air more humid. In particular, inland regions of the south will see searing temperatures. The monsoon rain will continue until this Wednesday due to a low-pressure system approaching from the north of the peninsula. Central regions will see heavy showers. The Seoul metropolitan area in Gangwon-do province will see the most amount of rainfall with up to 250 millimeters. Parts of Jeollado and Gyeongsang-do provinces will see 20 to 70 millimeters. Locally heavy downpours are possible for southern parts of the country overnight. Morning lows in Seoul will be starting off at 24 degrees Celsius. As for the daily highs, Seoul and Chuncheon will get up to 26 degrees. Daejeon and Gwangju will reach 30 degrees. Most parts of the country will stay humid this week, and central regions will see frequent monsoon showers. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
And that's all from us. As always, thank you for watching.